Conformément à l'article
In accordance with Standing Order 108.2, this information session on the existing official languages roadmap, I would remind you that this session is televised. We are therefore very happy to have with us the Honourable Scott Bryson, President of the Treasury Board. Welcome, Minister. He is with Anne-Marie Smart, Senior Director of Human Resources with the Directorate of Human Resources. Marc Tremblay, Executive Director, Centre of Excellence for Official Languages, Office of the Chief Human Resources Officer. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We will proceed as we usually do. Minister, you have some 10 minutes to make your statement, after which we'll ask committee members whether they have comments or questions. Please go ahead, Minister. We're delighted to have you with us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, and I thank you for your committee's invitation to have me appear before your committee. I'm pleased to be here to speak about our government's commitment to official languages, and in particular about my role as President of the Treasury Board. As members of the committee know, the Prime Minister holds both official languages very close to his heart. He has experienced linguistic duality across Canada. Where I grew up, in rural Nova Scotia, in an English-speaking community, I never had to think about bilingualism much at the time. I didn't listen to Robert Charlebois very much or turn on La Soirée du Hockey. I learned French as an adult in Ottawa.
Lovely bilingual daughters, and I often spend holidays with my in-laws who live in the countryside outside of Drummondville. Mes filles s'appellent Rose.
My daughters are called Rose and Claire. We chose names that work very well in both official languages. In fact, we do speak with them in both official languages. But I fear that they might end up with my accent in French.
To a Quebecer has made me part of a francophone family and giving me the gift of their language and culture. Aujourd'hui, j'aime la musique des trois accords.
Today, I love the music of the Trois Accords, and I love watching movies like Crazy or La Grande Séduction.
In part, that I take on my responsibilities as President of the Treasury Board in regard to the Official Languages Act. These responsibilities were made clear to me and also to the Minister of Heritage. In our mandate letters, you've all seen, and of course in my mandate letter, it's public, as are all the mandate letters, designates one official language as one of my priorities. More specifically, I've been mandated to, quote, ensure that all federal services are delivered in full compliance with the Official Languages Act, supported by the Minister of Canadian Heritage. My responsibilities fall principally within the scope of three parts of the Act. Part 4 concerns the communications with and services to the public. Part 5 is about the language of work. Within reason, federal public servants should be able to work in the official language of their choice. Part 6 concerns the employment of both French-speaking and English-speaking Canadians and federal institutions to ensure their full participation. En tant que président du Conseil du Trésor,
as President of the Treasury Board, I'm required to present an annual report to Parliament, a report that describes the progress made by federal institutions with regards to application of the Official Languages Act. I would like to share some highlights of the latest annual report with the committee.
The public through more than 11,000 offices and points of service in nearly 200 federal institutions across the country and abroad. 35% of these offices offer services in both French and English. The latest report for 2015 demonstrates that over 95% of employees who provide frontline services to Canadians and supervisors across the public service meet the language requirements of their positions. When it comes to the participation rates of Anglophones and Francophones, they've remained relatively stable over the past 10 years. On March
34th, 2015, we saw that participation by Anglophone Canadians in all federal institutions was approximately 73%, while participation by Francophones was 25%.
Census data, where 75% of Canadians reported English as their first spoken language and 23% reported French. So it tells us that the official language groups continue to have reasonable representation within the public service, and that there are fair and equitable opportunities for both Anglophones and Francophones to obtain employment within the public service. The annual report also highlights measures being undertaken by federal institutions to create and maintain a bilingual work environment, in addition to ensuring that all services and communications to the public are done in compliance with the Act. Les institutions ont également établi.
Institutions have also established clear performance objectives related to parts 4, 5, and 6 of the Act, and have included these in public servants' performance agreements where appropriate.
Another important step is the establishment of official language champions and persons responsible for official languages in their organizations. These people meet regularly to share best practices as they are responsible for the promotion and respect of official languages in their institutions. They discuss performance, develop strategies to maintain and monitor progress. Ce sont des mesures importantes.
These are important measures, but we have to do more. We know that federal departments and agencies face challenges when it comes to implementing the Official Languages Act. For example, best practices and shared knowledge can be lost in the turnover among official languages champions and those responsible for official languages. We need to ensure that effective social networks are in place in order to share and build on good practices and advice. We are fortunate to have a bilingual public service. It is essential that language skills remain valued at work and that new employees take measures to acquire needed language skills early in their careers. Institutions must continue to promote a workplace that encourages the use of both official languages and the maintenance of acquired language skills.
Of technology and social media presents a challenge for federal institutions, but also an opportunity. Social media is one of the most effective and popular communication methods we all know to reach the public. And it's important that communications be done in compliance with the Act. Mais nous avons aussi des occasions
But we have golden opportunities before us. I often think about them when my in-laws Skype with my daughters. If my French-speaking in-laws can communicate across Canada, from one end of Canada to another with my daughters, then how is it that we don't make better use of such technologies to create better links between all Canadians in minority language communities? The tools we have should make it possible for us to provide better access, so access to bilingual services, unprecedented access to bilingual services. Not only is our government committed to ensuring that all federal services are offered in full compliance with the Act, but also looks for opportunities that go beyond our obligations.
To discuss this, because I have great respect for and value the work of parliamentary committees. I'm hoping that we can collaborate and continue to work together on these important issues. I want to congratulate the committee on its work so far. Je suis très heureux de discuter avec vous.
I look forward to our conversation here today and to your continued engagement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minister. We'll begin right away with the first round of questions and comments. Ms. Boucher. Good afternoon, Minister, and welcome to the Official Languages Committee. There are many things that I've noticed in previous years under Stephen Harper's government. We saw the title of Canadian heritage and official languages everywhere. We saw those words everywhere. And with the previous government, there was an official languages minister. The word official languages is no longer part of any minister's job title. It has disappeared as if by magic. How can we make sure that all federal agencies and departments are in full compliance with the Official Languages Act when there is no a single minister who's responsible for official languages? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I very much appreciate the question. It's quite clear in the mandate letters that I and the Minister of Canadian Heritage received that compliance with official languages is a priority for this government. It's an essential priority for our Prime Minister. And no one believes otherwise. It is absolutely clear that this is a priority, and we will establish the policies to increase and improve the promotion of official languages here in Ottawa and across Canada. We will seek opportunities to expand the services to all Canadians, or to Canadians in all areas in both official languages. It's a priority for all of Cabinet. Please believe me, I know it was a priority for the previous government, but it is absolutely a priority for this government as well. So, if it's so important to your government, why is there no one minister responsible for official languages? Well, we have two ministers responsible for official languages. That's even better. I, as President of Treasury Board, and the Minister of Canadian Heritage, Ms. Joly. She has a parliamentary secretary who's extraordinary, who is here with us today. So that's even better, because we have two ministers responsible for official languages. We have redoubled our efforts. We're working twice as hard to show our respect and compliance with official languages. Allow me to be skeptical. This may be clear to you, but for those who are watching, for all Canadians watching, the word official languages is being taken out of the job title, and the priority isn't clear to anyone. I'd like to speak to you about the Translation Bureau. You have given very little assistance. Your government has provided very little assistance. 138 jobs are going to be lost in the next 2 years. And according to an article in Le Devoir, you have no intention of taking any positive action in that regard. Do you have any plan to ensure the Translation Bureau's future? Or to safeguard the Translation Bureau's future, I should say. Again, I appreciate the question. I believe that the reduction in the number of jobs at the Translation Bureau occurred under the previous government. Clearly, it's very important to invest in the Translation Bureau. We have a great deal of respect for the work they do, and it's very important to support the work they do and to make the investments that are needed. We also recognize the need to increase their capacity to provide service to public servants and to the citizens of Canada with technology. We'll continue to use technology. I believe that the job reductions, and there were job cuts under the previous government, but it's a priority for us to support the Bureau's work, and we'll continue to do so. You've been in power for 7 months now, so perhaps you should stop knocking the previous government. We don't want to know what they did. We want to know what you're going to do. And as I see it, you have no plan. And as I see in this article, you have no plan to ensure, to safeguard the future of the Translation Bureau. In the throne speech, in the speech from the throne, the words official languages came up only once. It states the government will support CBC Radio-Canada, encourage the use of both official languages in the country, and will invest in cultural and artistic industries in Canada. So could you please explain why official languages aren't mentioned when we hear that the CBC is tabling its projects in English only? Again, I appreciate the question put by Ms. Boucher, Mr. Chairman. It's a little ironic that she, as a Conservative, is asking for more support for CBC Radio-Canada. We, as a government, have invested a great deal in both arms of the CBC, French and English, and we thank you for her support for our investments in the budget. After 10 years of cuts by Conservative governments to CBC Radio-Canada, it's certainly important to reinvest in the corporation.
It's a priority for our government to ensure that both Radio-Canada and CBC continue to have the resources they need to provide services across Canada in both languages. It is a bit, I wasn't aware of her party's passion for Radio-Canada and CBC, but we welcome the support for our recent
C'est surtout pour les langues officielles.
Madame Boucher, là, c'est juste qu'on a dépassé un peu.
The support is particularly for official languages. We've gone over time, so Minister, with your permission, we'll move on to Paul Lefebvre. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister, welcome. Very happy to welcome you here today. I can tell you that I'm very happy that the investment your government has made in Radio-Canada CBC has been made, even though last weekend people came to see us in Winnipeg to thank us. So I'm very humble when I see how much support we've received for this. I know that your time is limited. We're writing a report on the Translation Bureau, but before I come to that, I'd like to ask you about the budget. The former government cut a lot of programs. I also sit on the Public Accounts Committee, And it's quite clear in all reports that there have been cuts to all programs. My concern is this. How can Treasury Board ensure equal status of both official languages with all the cuts there have been in recent years? That has become a very difficult task. So what will Treasury Board do to get things back on track? Will the cuts affect services offered under new programs? Thank you for the question. Treasury Board is responsible, in cooperation with the Minister of Canadian Heritage, for ensuring compliance with the Official Languages Act in the public service and in the services that we provide to Canadians. We must ensure that we are in compliance with not only the Official Languages Act, but with the policies. Every department and agency has to be in compliance with official languages policies. It's important that we have the resources needed to achieve this. And it is always important for us to ensure that we invest the resources needed. Moreover, it's important that we ensure the policy is in force across government.
We have to continue this progress. The resources, financial resources, are part of the equation. I think, and we need to make sure that and we have the right level of financial resources to deliver services in French and English and to ensure. I also think that we can take a more robust approach to the utilization of technology as well. I think that that's something that is important. When I said earlier that my mother-in-law outside of Drummondville uses Skype to talk to her grandchildren, but if she's, say, in Nova Scotia in an Anglophone community, she doesn't necessarily, she can go to a Service Canada office, for instance, in Kentville, Nova Scotia, and maybe find a Francophone there, or maybe not. But perhaps she could use technology to speak to a Francophone or to Skype with, an audio-visual capacity with a Francophone public servant to talk about, these are things, and I actually genuinely want the committee's engagement on these as we move forward to find ways to expand, not just to maintain, but to expand services in both languages across the country. Combination of financial resources, technology, and innovation. I think we can actually expand, not just protect what we have, but do better.
Thank you. On a reçu plusieurs témoins.
We've received a number of witnesses from the Translation Bureau, and one thing that became clear in the past 10 years under the previous government is that the Translation Bureau was treated as if it was a business. It had to be profitable. And that obliged a number of departments to provide in-house translation services. So instead of using the Translation Bureau, they set up phantom translation units. I'd like your opinion on how Treasury Board sees those phantom units in the future. It's very important that the quality of translations within government be maintained. And that's why we encourage all public servants and all departments and agencies of the federal government to use the Translation Bureau. At the same time, we have to ensure that the Translation Bureau has the resources it needs to provide services efficiently. Through public servants within the Bureau and through technology. I understand that every week that 1.3 million times the Translation Bureau's comprehension tool is used. Often they were using Google Translate, and I'd much rather see a government-provided comprehension tool that does use the government vocabulary and that is more secure than Google Translate. So I recognize the need for flexibility, but at the same time, it is a priority for us to ensure that the quality of translation remains sufficiently high, that we have good quality translations each time. And that's why we encourage all public servants in all agencies and departments to use the Translation Bureau. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Choquette. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minister, for being here today, and thank you to your colleagues. The first question I'm going to put is somewhat general, but it's important. In the report on plans and priorities for 2016-17 by Canadian Heritage, Treasury Board is mentioned, and with Treasury Board, the Department of Canadian Heritage is going to continue reviewing government-wide governance of official languages. A little earlier, we asked who was steering the official languages ship. We don't know exactly whether it's you, whether it's the Minister of Canadian Heritage. If there are two of you whose hand is primarily on the tiller, since there is a review of governance going on at the moment, could you give us a preliminary report? Is there a preliminary report? I believe there is. Will you make it public? When will that review be completed? And when it is completed, will you share it with the committee? Thank you for your question.
What I said earlier, that in terms of the delineation between my responsibilities and those of the Minister of Heritage, my responsibilities fall principally within the scope of three parts of the Act. Part 4 concerning the communications with and services to the public. Part 5 is about the language of work, and that within reason federal public servants should be able to work in the official language of their choice. And Part 6 concerning the employment of both French-speaking and English-speaking Canadians in federal institutions to ensure their full participation. So we are working, and what's very clear by the words and actions of the Minister of Heritage and mine, and I can tell you, our Prime Minister, this is a priority for.
Very well, Mr. Bryson. I don't want to interfere, but I just want to know what is going on with the government's study right now. Where is it, and what's going on with that? Where
for the next report?
Yeah, when we will have this? Because there is a study right now going on. So where is it? What's going on with that? And when it will be and when it will become public?
J'aimerais demander à Marc pour le report.
I'd like to ask Mark to respond to this question. Yes, so there is a study that was announced in the wake of the evaluation of the last roadmap, and the horizontal evaluation of the roadmap suggested that the Department of Canadian Heritage conduct a study to review the governance. Some of the recommendations that were made indicated that for some public servants, for some people who had commented on the previous roadmap, the question as to who made the decisions and when was an issue. So the Treasury Board Secretariat participated in a task force. We studied what existed already in this regard, and there is currently a draft report that is being studied by the Committee of SMAs. But Mr. Tremblay, can you tell us who was met with? Can you tell the committee? We want to know what's going on because we're going to be studying the roadmap, and we can see that there was already an interesting study that was conducted on governance, and we would like the committee to be informed on this matter. Is it possible for you to inform the committee on this review? Well, given that I did not conduct the study, I cannot give you a full answer. I can tell you that we participated in it. It is the Department of Canadian Heritage that is conducting the study. We consulted our communities, the communities that participated in Parts 4, 5, and 6 of the Act. And so those are people responsible for official languages in the departments, the official language champions. And so we conducted consultations. But that was only a part of the work that was done by the department. I only have a bit of time left. So, Minister Bryson, I would like to ask you, I sent a letter to Honourable Judy Foote concerning the language comprehension tool. That it should have been called that from the outset. But I would like her to revisit her decision to implement that tool as long as this committee, which is working on a report, has not completed it. We learned about a week ago that the implementation was announced of this tool, whereas the committee is still reporting on it. What is your reaction to that? As I said, the use of translation tools in this example here, the comprehension tool is common. It's commonly used by public servants. Translation tools are commonly used. Now, when a public servant uses Google Translate, for example, which is frequently the case, it is not secure. It does not use the corpus, the government vocabulary, and I think that it is better to have a comprehension tool, and it is very important to have the ability to do so. But at the same time, we are waiting for the completion of your report, and we will definitely consider the recommendations made therein. But until such time, it is very important to continue to have a tool that works for public servants. In fact, the translators in the Translation Bureau even use machine translation. They use translation technologies every day in their work. So I think that it only makes sense to continue making this tool available, making this comprehension tool available until such time as while your report is ongoing.
It's been a million times per week across the federal public service. Public servants use a technology for translation or comprehension. Within the Bureau of Translation, the translators use these. We have made changes in Ms. Foote's department and in terms of the tool for comprehension, encouraging it more for comprehension than translation of external messages. But are you suggesting we stop providing any of these tools, and so that everybody uses Google Translate? I don't think that would
what
make
I
a
was
great
asking.
deal of
I know
sense.
that I don't have time, but I would just answer you because you are asking me a question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
I've spent
I was
more
just
time in
asking you.
opposition
I was
asking
just
questions
asking you. I was just asking you, Mr. Minister, if you should not have waited
Monsieur Choquette?
the end of the report.
Monsieur Choquette?
Mr. Choquette?
Croyez-moi.
Mr. Choquette, believe me, we are very much looking forward to your committee report, and we will consider your recommendations. But we still need a certain capacity. We still need the ability for our public servants to use some kind of comprehension tool. And the decision of my colleague, the Minister of Public Works, well, that's what it used to be called when I was there. I respect her decision, and I think that it only makes sense to continue to use this comprehension tool. Thank you, Mr. Sanson. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank the Minister and his colleagues for being here today before the committee. As member for Nova Scotia, like you, I'm very pleased to have you here with us today. And also, you hold a position that is very important in our government. I have a few points to make before putting a few questions. Now, unlike you, first of all, I did grow up in a bilingual environment, and I was able to take advantage of both official languages. And I'd like to commend you on doing so well in French at your age. And obviously, your daughters Claire and Rose can go to French school in Nova Scotia because, as you know, the result of the outcomes for French schools are very, very good. And we have an increase in our Francophone student population of 22% as compared to other provinces and the Anglophone public. So we're very happy to welcome you. Second, I would also like to raise the point that I also find it rather ironic that my colleagues on the other side, the Conservatives, I find it ironic that they're talking about the Translation Bureau when they were the ones who cut 400 jobs and caused a lot of problems that exist today. So it actually makes me sad to hear this. And for the translation tool should only be a comprehension tool. That's clear for me. Now, my question, a very important one, Minister, is that you know that Senator Chaput had introduced Bill S-209, which is now being sponsored by Senator Tardif. What are your thoughts on this report, on this bill, and are there elements of this bill that could be implemented by the Treasury Board, even if the bill is has not yet been studied by both houses? So it would be very good to know whether the elements of this bill could be implemented. Thank you, Mr. Sampson, for your question. And it is important to acknowledge that current legislation came into force in 1991, and since that time, there have been significant changes made. And so, as I told Senator Tardif recently, I am open to making changes to modernize the legislation to achieve the objectives of Bill S-209. And quite frankly, I would really appreciate the input of the committee on this as well, because I think that a great deal of progress can be made with some changes to the legislation. And so this afternoon, I will be meeting with the Senate committee as well to discuss the same topic. And many things have changed since 1991, obviously, including technology, for example. And it is very clear for me that we need to modernize our legislation. And therefore, I would greatly appreciate the opinion and the input of this committee. Thank you very much, Minister, because this is very important that we can make some headway on this, especially with immigration, with refugees, to ensure that Francophone immigrants can grow up in a Francophone environment. My second question is concerning the bilingualism of justices on the Supreme Court. Further to the report of Graham Fraser, the Official Languages Commissioner, who recommends that the judges on the Supreme Court be bilingual. Now, that falls under your responsibility in terms of services. Can you give us your thoughts on that, please? Our government will fulfill its commitment to appoint bilingual judges to the Supreme Court. We feel that Canadians should be able to be heard in the official language of their choice at the Supreme Court. We think that that is very important for Canadians and for our government. We also committed to ensuring greater diversity in our judicial system, and we will work with all parties in the House and with partners as well to make sure that the appointment process to the Supreme Court is more transparent, inclusive, and accountable. Thank you. I'd just like to close very quickly. I'd like once again to congratulate the minister. He's just getting better and better all the time on his French. Just between us, I'm not very confident in my French, but you're doing very well. So the minister says, I greatly appreciate your patience. My spouse is not as patient as you are, I have to say. He refuses to speak French with me. From time to time, he says, shut up, I'm not Berletz. So according to him, I speak too slowly, and I tell him not to be so mean. I'm very sensitive. I'm a sensitive guy. Thank you very much, Madame Lapointe. Go ahead. Yes, all you people are much nicer than my spouse is. Yes, I'm very nice. We agree Mr. Sanson is very nice. Thank you very much, Minister, for being here with us today. I think it's beautiful that you called your daughters Claire and Rose. My children are Sarah, William, Simon, and Victoria for exactly the same reason, so that they can be used in both languages. My children went to French school, and they are bilingual, even trilingual. I think the more languages we speak, the better. So I do commend you on your language skills. Earlier, you referred to the official languages champions and the fact that you're trying to use best practices and to transfer them. I'd like to hear you tell us how the official language champions work, and how do you succeed in transferring best practices? In this department, we have the official languages champions, whose job is to promote the use of both official languages and to share the best practices across the government. Quite frankly, we need to do more and I would like to increase our efforts to improve services among the different departments in the government, among public servants, and also to provide services to Canadian citizens. That is part of our efforts.
It's been since 2012, the role of the official languages champion as a policy. It's a fairly short period of time. I like very much the idea, and I think they're doing good work. I want to strengthen the roles of the official champions, the official language champions. It's important that, and to encourage within the public service, even during my in our briefings, and to encourage public servants to speak in the language of their choice, to encourage that not just in my department or agency, but elsewhere. In our, you may notice I use in a committee sometimes because I don't want to miss anything, but I try even in cabinet meetings or in caucus meetings or when I'm dealing, I don't use this because it helps to improve your ability to, this is a tool, it's important in an official capacity sometimes to have this so that I don't miss anything and I don't disrespect any nuance that may be in a question. But we want to ensure that people are encouraged to learn, to utilize their language of choice, but also to learn actively within the public service. I think there's been good progress made in terms of the official language champions, but I want to make sure that we're giving them the resources and support they need to increase the value and capacity of their work.
Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. We all know that our Prime Minister lived linguistic duality himself. He grew up in both official languages, and he always speaks to us in both official languages as well. Within your department, I'm talking about the Treasury Board, are the people with you, did they feel that there was more openness to both official languages? Because sure, we've been in power for 7 months now, and we don't want to blame the former government, but do you feel more openness within the ranks of the public service?
Madame Lapointe,
Ms. Lapointe, if Anne-Marie or Mark would like to respond, it's their choice, but at the same time, it's difficult for government officials to answer this type of question because it creates an impression of partisanship. So if my colleagues wish to answer, they may go ahead, but I understand that it might be difficult for them. I'm sorry, Ms. Lapointe. I'd like to maybe I can sort this out because your time is up. Come on, Mr. Chair. So you smiled, so that was enough for me. A few seconds? Thank you. I can confirm that official languages are part and parcel of the daily activities within the Treasury Board. And when we were preparing our intervention today, it was all in French with the Minister. Thank you, Ms. Smart. Thank you. Mr. Généreux, go ahead. It must be very tiring for the public servants indeed. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here with us today.
Our partners, my wife is an Anglo-Montrealer, so I've been having lessons on the, I laugh about it because I always say that I learn on the pillow, which is the best place to learn French, to learn English, and she was the best place to learn French as well. So on fait beaucoup d'erreurs malgré.
So I still make lots of mistakes, even though I've been married for 27 years to my wife. that I've made errors for 27 years, so maybe I should call her the Berlitz as well, because she's starting to be tired. But, you know, we have to make an effort. Our children were raised in both languages, and we should propose in this committee that everyone has to get married to a member of the other official language community. And that way, more people would be bilingual. Now, joking aside, Minister, your department has major ambitions with regard to the hiring of new public servants, especially the next generation. How are you going to ensure that there is an equality that is implemented to make sure that young Canadians who will eventually become public servants respect our official languages? Because we know that young people, as Ms. Lapointe said earlier, our young people are very inclined to learn foreign languages. So I think that there are many Canadians who would be excellent candidates for our public service. So do you have an absolute priority with regard to these young people?
Tout d'abord, c'est une priorité pour notre gouvernement.
First of all, it is a priority for our government to hire more millennials. In French or English, I think it's the same word. Now, the average age of new hires in the public service is 36 years old. And we have to do more to attract millennials to Canada's public service. Some progress has been made. The percentage of bilingual jobs in the public service has increased from 35% in 2000 to 41% in 2010. And so there has been some progress, but we need to do more. And we must make it easier for public servants earlier on in their career to become bilingual. There are traditional language schools, for example, in Saint-Jean or Montreal or Chicoutimi, but there is also more advanced language learning technology. That's very important. And also, the fact remains, and the problem continues to exist, that is that in Canada we need to do more as a country to increase bilingualism across Canada, not just in the public service, but in the country as a whole. We need to work with other levels of government and with the Department of Canadian Heritage. In my opinion, it is very important to continue our efforts to make the public service more bilingual, but that is just one part of the solution. We need to do more everywhere across the country to increase bilingualism and promote it. I'm sorry.
As well.
Ministre, M. Vandal.
Merci beaucoup.
Mr. Vandal, go ahead. Thank you very much. Minister Bryson, I'm a representative of an official language minority area in Winnipeg, and I can say that I appreciate the efforts you're making in the French language. It's truly exemplary. As a senior leader of our country, when I read the report before us today, it makes me wonder
That in
2010, we had 1,715 employees full-time, and by 2013, we were down to 1,397 for a loss of 315 employees. I'm wondering, Mr. Bryson, if you were aware of that and if you could offer any insight or comment on that.
J'étais au courant.
I was aware of those figures in the Translation Bureau. Once again, I have a great deal of respect for the work they do, for the importance of the work they do, and our government will ensure that they will receive the resources necessary to maintain the services they provide. It is truly a goal of our government to expand their services and their ability to serve the public in traditional ways, obviously, but also using technology as well. We must be open as a government in every department to using modern technologies. And therefore, yes, I was aware of the reduction in job numbers. Now, my priority is to ensure that the services provided are excellent and that the quality of the service continues to be so. And at the same time, we are open to making use of technology in the Translation Bureau. For example, this language comprehension tool. And we are open to making use of technology everywhere in order to promote bilingualism in the public service. How can you say Luddite in French?
Luddite.
OK.
Comment on dit Luddite en français?
Désolé.
Luddite. Luddite. That works? Luddite.
Je pense que
but I think everyone understands that there are changes in technology, but everyone recognizes the importance of the role of a professional translator. This role is very, very important. And we have to ensure that we have enough professional translators in the public service. Mr. Chair, 1 minute. Minister Bryson, we've often heard that the Portage translation tool is a tool for understanding, not for communication.
Tool and not a communication tool. Can you comment on that briefly with the time we have?
Oui, et je suis d'accord que l'outil de...
Yes. And yes, the comprehension tool is for comprehension, exactly. And it is also important for all of us here to recognize that public servants do use tools such as Google Translate. And I don't trust Google Translate particularly. It's not secure. It does not use governmental vocabulary. And so we have to be very careful in ensuring that we work closely with the Translation Bureau and public servants everywhere. We have to ensure that they have the tools that they need to carry out their responsibilities. Thank you. This closes off the different questions for the first part. Mr. Choquette, go ahead. Mr. Chair, I would like to ask the committee whether Mr. Bryson would have another 15 or 20 minutes for a last round of questions. I think Mr. Bryson is expected at the Senate. Is that correct? I am appearing before another committee, yes. Oh, you're too popular, I see. But I would, to come back? Yes, I'd certainly like to come back. And once again, I respect the role and responsibilities of this committee. I have been a member of Parliament since 1997, and I was a minister for 2 years, and I was a member of Parliament who worked very hard on committee for 17 years. So I clearly recognize the importance of committees and the work that you do. So I would very much like to come back. I'd like to share a small personal anecdote because, as I said, frankly, I do make errors when I speak French. My mother-in-law, Ms. Saint-Pierre from Drummondville, speaks only French, nothing but French. And so when I speak with her or with her husband, Mr. Saint-Pierre, I try to speak only in French. And this is a very important story for Mr. Paradis, who has a vineyard in Quebec. I have a vineyard at home as well, a small one. But I also have an apple orchard. And I remember one evening when I was at home, and I said to my mother-in-law, this was in the summertime, and I said to my mother-in-law, Ms. Saint-Pierre, did you see my orchard? I meant to.
One of the, you have to have courage when you're venturing into new languages. But I wanted to let you know that I continued even after that foray into French at my place to continue to progress. And she was, like you have been, very patient with me. Maxime, mon conjoint, n'était pas très patient.
My partner wasn't very patient at that time. Thank you again for your patience and for the passion you have for both official languages. I share your passion, and I am looking forward to working with you further. Thank you. Minister? We have a vineyard and not an orchard. And it's been a great pleasure to have you here today with Mr. Tremblay and Ms. Smart. You are very welcome before this committee. We'll adjourn for a few moments. Thank you.
Reprenons conformément à l'article.
We'll resume in accordance with Standing Order 108.2. We'll resume with our study of the Translation Bureau. Before we begin, I'll hear Mr. Choquette. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank everyone from the Translation Bureau who is here again before us today. But I would have liked, as our recommendation had been, to see people from Public Services and Procurement Canada, as I believe it's called now, people who would answer for the Honourable Judy Foote. That's what we'd asked for. I understand that the Honourable Judy Foote can't be here because she's away or has other commitments, but we would have liked to see her Deputy Minister, for example, so we could put questions that are more departmental in nature, questions on governance, what the department's role is and its link to the Translation Bureau. So I don't know whether the committee agrees, but I would very much like to see why today we could not have somebody who represents the Honourable Minister Foote as we had requested. Thank you for your comments. I believe committee members had said they certainly wanted to hear Ms. Achimov on some specific points and had questions, so we can take advantage of this afternoon's opportunity to see Ms. Achimov on those points on which committee members want clarification. As I understand, Ms. Foote is not in Ottawa this week, but we could at some point think about re-inviting her. I have no issue with that. And hear her somewhat later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we begin, I understand that there's a tradition at this committee when the Official Languages Commissioner tables a report. I have Mr. Choquette's motion before me. It says that the Official Languages Committee invite Commissioner Graham Fraser to testify before the committee on the 1st of June. And at that point, we could have a televised committee meeting to provide his comments. We could invite the Official Languages Commissioner to speak on his report. We should finish with the report we're looking at now, but right after. I believe that, as is the tradition, the committee should receive and certainly invite the Official Languages Commissioner to speak about the tabling of his most recent report. Mr. Chairman, I absolutely agree. And in fact, I do have a motion on the table. It's a matter of tradition and respect for the Official Languages Commissioner. His report was tabled recently. He also tabled a report on justice, and on June 7th we'll be tabling a special report on Air Canada. So it would be wonderful to see him after June 7th so that we'd have an opportunity to ask him questions on the 3 reports that are going to be all public in quick succession. Very good suggestion. So after June 7th, June 7th is a Tuesday. Would you like us to schedule him for June the 8th? When is our next meeting? It would be on the 8th, on the day after his June 7th report is made public. Settled. Good afternoon, Ms. Achimov. Welcome. Ms. Achimov is with Adam Gibson, Vice President of Linguistic Services, Nancy Gauthier, Vice President Business Strategies and Partnerships, Lucie Séguin is Vice President of Corporate Services, all with the Translation Bureau. Welcome, everyone. Some of the committee members wanted clarification on some points, so I will go quite quickly, perhaps faster than the 5 or 6 minutes we're accustomed to. So if we could finish answering questions within half an hour, that would be excellent. Because Ms. Achimov has already appeared before the committee. We're only seeking clarification on some points. So we'll begin with Mr. Généreux. Thank you. The reason we asked to see you again, to see you as well as those who built the Portage tool, is this. When we met all witnesses, one person in particular focused on the notion of the corpus. The corpus, if I understand correctly, is the body of words and expressions that are entered into the system in order to ensure that what comes out at the other end corresponds to what was fed into it. So I'd like to make sure I can gain a proper understanding of how the corpus works. Of course, it has a cost. There are people who work on it. Do I, as a user, have an opportunity to feed the corpus? Or is it done by people who are paid to enter information into the corpus? I think we don't know enough to understand how it works. I'd like to give all four of you the opportunity to give us as much information about the corpus as possible. How does it work? What's put into it? What comes out of the other end? I have a money question. How much does it cost to feed the corpus? It's great to have software, but what has to be put into it is input by whom, and how much does it cost? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that very good question, because it will help everyone gain a better understanding of how the tool works. I will give the floor in a few moments to Nancy Gauthier, who's responsible for our client relationships and for innovation as well. Nancy.
Thank
you for the question. The corpus is made up of phrases and terminology taken from all government sites. These are government phrases and terms. And the corpus is the entire body of them. It was developed by the National Research Council. The job of assessing content to see what comes out depending on what you feed in. Well, whenever we look at the corpus, the tool uses the statistical recurrence rate at which a string is used. For example, if the phrase le chien, which is translated as being the dog, is put in frequently, then it will be correctly translated. What we do is look at the equivalents and have them assessed by language professionals. They assess the equivalence of these phrases, and then these equivalencies are sent to the National Research Council, and then they retrain the engine. They train it to recognize these recurrent phrases and retrieve the correct equivalent. So that means that all of us, any of us, if we have a phrase and its equivalent, if we all write the same thing, that is considered as being the correct translation, and then the NRC does the retraining on the basis of that sentence. Is it checked again at the NRC end? Because if there's an error initially, that error will just keep on being reproduced. Statistically speaking, yes, but the Bureau has made a commitment to continuously improve the content of the corpus. So if we see that there's a recurrent error, it's up to us to tell the NRC and point it out and have them correct it. Is my time already up? Well, we're trying to go faster. We'll come back to you if there's time. Mr. Lefebvre, 4 minutes. Well, if I have 4 minutes, I'll be quick. One of the witnesses we heard from the Translation Bureau, or rather about the Translation Bureau, had some concerns about the next generation. So how many new hires are you projecting? Well, if I may, I'll answer that. We don't have a precise number in mind. It'll, of course, depend on the workload that we have when we need to meet our clients' needs. We want to find the means to deal with the demand from clients, both in-house and externally. So we seem to be reaching that sweet spot, the right balance between in-house and external resources. And we're trying to find the best factors that enable us to stay on that sweet spot. There are, of course, factors like security, where we do the work in-house when there's a clearance required, confidential documents. So you are examining how you can find that balance. Yes. Has demand increased or dropped in recent years from departments? Are departments giving you more work or less? We've seen a change in how they communicate. Perhaps that's the best way of putting it. Now, with social media, we are seeing that there's a tendency in a number of departments to use the social media. In recent years, we'd see press releases, documents that would add value and history. They were more extensive, and now some of that work, that effort, is being achieved through social media because of new technologies and also because of new trends in how government communicates with Canadians. I wanted to ask you whether there's more demand or less, because we've heard witnesses who believe that many departments were doing their own translations in-house. They had people translating, phantom translation units. And, of course, they're also entitled to contract translations out. So that's why I'm putting the question. So people in these phantom translation units may not be as qualified. They don't have the translation professionals you have. So we'd like to hear your views on these units. So what's being done in your offices, what's being done externally, and what's being done in these phantom units? We have often heard about these phantom units. Ms. Gautier's team is very assertive, aggressive in promoting our services. It's much more efficient to have professionals. But in departments, and I believe this is a good thing, if somebody who is bilingual and has to draft a briefing note at the last minute, there are people who are fully bilingual and work in both official languages. That's a good thing. However, we are extremely passionate about promoting our services and explaining that the best way to go is through professional translators. Mr. Choquette. Mr. Chairman, thank you. And welcome back. The first question I have for you, Ms. Achimov. What made you change your mind so that the translation tool is now a comprehension tool? Thank you for that question. Of course, we started with using a term that everybody was using, machine translation. But after all the conversations that were held with this committee and with the media, we came to believe it might be a good idea to specify exactly how the tool should be used to best effect, and we believe it is best used for comprehension so that we can understand what's being said in the second official language, in our own language, to get the gist, to have a good summary of a text or a passage. We think this is an excellent improvement, and I'd like to thank the committee for making the recommendation it did. But Ms. Achimov, as you know, I had asked you to put off the installation of this tool. There was a postponement of several weeks. Our report is going to be tabled soon, and yet you still decided to make it available as a comprehension tool when our report is only 1 or 2 weeks away. Why didn't you wait another week or two? We decided to launch the tool because we had made improvements. It had always been our plan to launch the tool. It was in our RRP.
On a eu plus d'efficacité avec.
It was in our 2017 RPP. We believed it would be more efficient. We thought it might be a good idea to describe it better. We also developed do's and don'ts on how to use it. And we consulted broadly with official languages champions on the issue of finding better ways of using the tool. I understand that the Translation Bureau provides services, translation services, of course. We spoke with Mr. Scott Bryson earlier. He was here, President of Treasury Board. What is the Translation Bureau's role? Does it have a specific role when it comes to compliance with the Official Languages Act? Thank you for the question. Yes, of course. Our mandate is focused on assisting the public service and the Government of Canada in providing service in both official languages. We have translators, interpreters, and they're right there in front of us. We have terminologists in both official languages, and we have the capacity, in conjunction with the private sector, of working in 110 other languages as well. A short supplementary? No, we'll come back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lapointe. Welcome. Thank you for being with us today. I'm happy that you all took account of the comments received at these committee meetings and decided to call it a comprehension tool rather than a translation tool. I think that's a very good thing. The question was it better to have the tool in place now rather than waiting for the report, which was going to be tabled so soon? What's your answer to that? We know that there is a need for state-of-the-art tools in the public service. The demand is there, and it's not going to go away. In our view, it's a good thing to have well-targeted tools, tools that are specifically targeted for use in the public service. Not only do they help comprehension, understanding, they also help maintain language skills and shape the future. I'm putting on my hat of co-chair of the Official Languages Champions Network. We're working extremely hard on changing the culture within the public service in order to ensure that people become genuinely curious about using the new tools like this, in order to improve and maintain both official languages. For some time now, for several weeks, the several weeks it's been in place, how's it going so far? Ms. Gauthier.
The latest numbers that we have currently are that we've had, since the launch, approximately 98,000 requests through the tool, with the majority saying that it's met their needs. Alors, la majorité des gens qui ont utilisé l'outil ont perçu.
Most people who've used the tool find that it does meet their needs. Excellent, thank you. So, all in all, the fact that it was launched right away, is there some kind of warning not to use it as a translation tool, but only for understanding? That was one of the warnings we had given. We worked very hard to communicate the purpose of this tool, that it was a tool for comprehension. We engaged all directors general of communications departments, of communications branches and departments. We exchanged information with official languages champions and with the entire human resources community, which for the most part are responsible for official languages.
with existing communities that were very much key to ensuring that we send out the appropriate messaging. And when we did message, we went to not only the deputies in each department, but we went to the champions of official languages as well as the heads of communication.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, M. Vandal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vandal. One of the things that is an issue for me with this tool is that a number of people are talking now about comprehension instead of communication. So can you comment on the fact that the name of the tool was changed and what your viewpoint is on that? Thank you for the question. For us, it is important to always be clear that professional translators have a job, and their job is to be responsible for official documents that citizens will read. And we tried very hard to provide a better understanding of the purpose of this tool. Professional translators are relied upon for official documents. This tool is just to help understanding, to help comprehension. I'm sorry, I'd just like to jump in here. I'd like to clarify. With regard to what Ms. Lapointe said and you, Mr. Vandal, it's a language comprehension tool. So we ask users to check off a box to attest that they have read the conditions of use. So we say explicitly that this service does not replace translation services. It's a tool for comprehension. And we also provide links to have access to our professional language services. So we hope that with all these reinforcements, including the fact that people must check a box to use the tool, we want to make people aware of how it should be used. Very good. So there's always a type of oversight over communications. That's good. Do I have some more time? Yes? In your 2015-16-17 business plan, you had the objective to explore crowdsourcing. What is that? Crowdsourcing refers to a collaborative effort to compile content by thanks to a specific community. For example, crowdsourcing for projects. So we tap into people. So it's tapping into people's ideas. You might have heard of crowdfunding as well. You can use crowdsourcing to raise funds for certain projects.
Specific to the translation industry, but it has been seen in the industry to be included in their workflow. Alors, ils vont envoyer un document, exemple, à une communauté d'experts langagiers.
So they may send a document to a group of language experts as a first phase, and then translators, professional linguists might go over it as well. So it's truly a way to cooperate on projects that involve translation or terminology where people are seeking certain expertise. So would this be using people outside the government? Yes, exactly. But if I can just clarify, Mr. Chair, the communities who are tapped into can be very broad, and they can also be very, very limited. So if we're talking about texts concerning translation, where particular expertise is called for, well, obviously the communities are validated first.
That is particularly certified in a certain area to contribute to a task of that type of collaborative nature.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Boucher.
Thank you. Go ahead, Madame Boucher. Thank you very much for being here. You have just talked about post-editing. We heard a lot about that from a number of witnesses. Can you please explain to us what post-editing is? And is there certain specific training for people who want to do post-editing? And who is qualified to do post-editing? We need to understand what all this is about. Thank you. I think I can answer your question. post-editing is a kind of quality assurance. So we're talking about post-editing when we talk about the performance of our freelancers. And so when we have a translation tool coming out as well, we do revision or post-editing. It's a type of quality assurance among our staff. We identify people who are qualified to do that. It is more for translators who are more experienced. And we had a good discussion with our colleagues in the private sector and with universities in professional associations, because this is a challenge that affects the entire sector. And it is something that we put more emphasis on with the universities. We want them to put in place more official training for post-editing, because we want to target people who have more experience.
To catch the right things. Ouais.
Donc, ce que je comprends, c'est qu'en ce moment, il n'y a pas nécessairement.
So if I understand correctly, no training currently exists for post-editing. It is a type of mentoring program that is undertaken with qualified people. For example, translators who are much more experienced. Is that correct? Yes. There are certain schools, but we are trying to determine what is the best school that exists right now and to develop something with the university. It is sort of a mix of things. We are tapping into the experience of our translators as well. And post-editing is done in both official languages, is that correct? So it has to be done well in both English and French. Yes, that's right. So the quality assurance involves post-editing in both languages. Okay, thank you. I have about 4 or 5 minutes left. Are there people who want to go to a SOP? Very briefly, please, Mr. Généreux, and Mr. Choquette, and Ms. Romanado. I'd like to quickly come back to this corpus. I want to clearly understand that is part and parcel of the tool, is that right? Everything that is fed into the tool will come out, and then you do post-editing. Who pays? Who pays for all this? Thank you for the question. Who pays for the corpus? Who pays for feeding the who pays for adding the terms? Is that part of the creation of the tool? If you're talking about the creation of the tool, I think it would probably be the National Research Council. They'd be best placed to talk to you about it. We in the Translation Bureau, we look after validating the existing corpus, the existing vocabulary. So we have professional translators who work on validating the quality assurance. Mr. Chair, remember I had asked for a table that could walk us through the creation of the tool, the corpus, and so forth, because I'm visual and I like to be able to understand something by looking it over, what the tool allows for. Is it possible? Ms. Ashimov, is that possible to have? Yes, we can. Yes, I'd appreciate that. Yes, we can. Yes, if you could table it with the committee, that would be great. Thank you very much. Mr. Choquette, go ahead, please. My first question is very simple, and I understand you may not be able to answer it right away, but could you please send us the number of full-time equivalents who are working on the language comprehension tool and or the financial resources in numbers? Would you be able to send that to committee, please? Please, in the coming days or weeks? Yes. Yes, Mr. Chair, yes. You can submit it to the clerk, obviously, not to me. And I know that you conducted surveys to understand how people were going to use this tool. Was that survey made public? Would you be able to send that survey to the committee so that we can understand how people answered this survey, because what I learned is that people thought they would be able to use this translation tool rather than the actual translation service. We can share the results. We have just launched the comprehension tool to a number of departments. It might take a bit of time to compile the results, but I must tell you frankly that we're beginning this summer with a pilot project with almost 400 public servants just to pilot this tool. So we must say that the types of sentences for comprehension, they're not the types of thing that come to the Translation Bureau for translation demands. They're excerpts of documents that people want to understand. They're very short texts, mostly to notify people, to put something on a phone message that says, I'm not at the office. They're very, very small texts that would never, ever come to the Translation Bureau. Thank you. Ms. Romanado? Thank you very much. I wasn't here for your presentation the last time in March, so perhaps you have heard this question already, but right now, I think there is a period of 48 hours maximum to issue a document, to translate a document, because my office has already used your services. Thank you very much. But is there a plan to reduce the turnaround time to meet the needs of MPs' offices? There are a few services like that. I think in 82% of the cases, we can meet the deadline, but sometimes we have to negotiate if it's a very, very urgent deadline. We try to negotiate, but we're on the point of ascertaining the factors that can have an impact on the services, because there are some opportunities to provide better service, but there are emergencies, and so we try to negotiate in order to meet members of Parliament's needs. How many translations do you do from English to French and from French to English? Do we have those? I don't have the figures here, actually. Most translations are done from English to French, the large majority. If you want, I can give you better numbers. So we translate some 754 million words a year, and the bulk of that is from English to French, and we can confirm the actual proportion with you. And
in terms of quality control, you mentioned that you do a verification of translation that's been done. In terms of if you see that you have a supplier or an internal person that the quality is not there, is there some training that's provided, or will you look for another supplier?
Thank you for the question. So I think as it relates to our external contracts, it's similar with almost any contracting vehicle. We have a quality assurance process, and we do take a look at the different providers, especially if there's one where we're seeing a consistency and concern with the level of quality of what we're getting out of them. You usually start out with a conversation and work your way down to see if this is something that's a little bit more permanent, in which case we do have the ability to knock off suppliers if they're not responding to our needs. And then internally, it becomes essentially a human resource issue, and so is the person not well trained enough, or they performing poorly, you investigate and respond accordingly.
Merci, Cherie. Monsieur Généreux.
Thank you, Ms. Romanado. Mr. Généreux, very quickly.
Not yet. We decided to manage it for the core public service, and we are looking at plans in terms of further expansion to other organizations. But right now, we just focused on the 33 core government departments.
Will it be this year?
Pardon me?
Will it be this year that it will be available for MPs?
We have to look at what the costs are and how the tool is performing.
What do you mean the cost? We already paid it, no? We already paid it by the CNSRG.
Well, we are looking at maintenance and upgrading. We just launched the tool, so our vision is we launched it small, we're seeing how it performs, and then we are looking at how to expand it across other organizations, including Parliament and the House of Commons.
Okay, thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Chinov.
Thank you, Ms. Ashimoff. And thank you to the members of your delegation as well. Thank you for the supplementaries. For the members of the committee, we will meet in camera on Wednesday. Yes, Mr. Lefebvre? I heard that the Commissioner of Official Languages will not be available on June 8th. Okay, well, we'll try and get a date. It would be June 13th.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Ashinoff. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Ms. Ashimoff. Thank you to the people with you. So Wednesday we will complete our report in camera, and the meeting is adjourned. Have a good day.